This is Ngarakau. It's a 300 hectare sheep and cattle property and forestry property. We're about 30 k's northwest of Whangarei. The property was originally owned by my parents, Richard and Wilma Davies Colley, and Nikki and I have been farming it for the last 30 years. It's a difficult bit of soil. It's very prone to erosion. You can see in the distance the natural cover, which was heavy podocarp forest, and when that was cleared for pasture, it allowed quite a few erosion problems to start. We've tried lots of different tree planting systems, partially experimental and partially to address some issues. So you can see some timber lines of radiata there, which have been a reasonably successful way of growing clear radiata, probably more successful than the wide-spaced radiata that we've used in an agroforestry regime in other areas. Through the gap in the trees here is an area of wide-spaced eucalypt, and that has been successful, and so the area's continued to be grazed and growing quite large Eucalyptus mulleriana. We've had quite a bit of involvement in logging over the years, and we've built a relationship with an exporter that exports to China and India, and while they mostly do radiata, they also export a number of other species, including poplar. So the poplars that we logged all went to China and have been well received, and we've done a number of blocks over time. One of the biggest constraints to it is that the poplars are planted there to control the erosion, which they do really well, and once we harvest them, we have to replant that, and like as the farms become more intense, it's been intensively grazed, it's harder to get poplars to re-establish. So we're having to work on systems to be able to do that. We've managed to do that quite successfully in that piece up there, and there are young bulls grazing under those trees now without any issues. We've had a land use philosophy which has looked at separating out areas where we can profitably farm and areas where it's much more difficult. And the simple rule of thumb that we've used on these sites is if it's possible to cultivate, then we tend to keep it in pasture. If it's too steep or difficult to cultivate, then we look to grow trees on those sites. And it's worked pretty well, and it's meant that the farming resources have been focused on the better areas, and we've been able to grow trees on the more difficult areas. One of the nice things about trees on farms, or if it's done well, is that there's quite a strong intergenerational issue, and it's a ability to be able to raise cash boxes which can be used to help various generations at different stages of what they're doing, and can be a useful tool for allowing the next generation to come onto the farm, or to actually create some income for a generation that's leaving the farm. In the distance there's a little block of radiata there. That's second rotation. The first rotation was planted in 1972 and harvested probably 10 or 12 years ago now. I'm spending most of my time at the moment logging small woodlots. It's a semi-retirement option which I really enjoy, and it's been quite satisfying helping people generate some income from their small blocks of trees. There's there's all sorts of problems that are generated with woodlots. Sometimes farmers take it to extremes in terms of identifying the sites that they're going to plant, and in some cases it's a very difficult site with no natural access, and you can get, in the worst case, you can get a stand of trees which is, is almost impossible to log. Generally, though, with a little bit of planning, if there's natural farm access, it's possible to log just about anything, and certainly in our area here, there's very few stands that don't have positive value, and in some cases, quite large positive values. Sometimes you need to be a little bit innovative into how you handle harvesting these blocks, and it's not always possible to use the same systems that you might use in a larger corporate block. Typically in a larger block, a highway truck road's actually built to the stand, and a large landing's built, and all the wood's extracted to that landing and loaded on the truck. That doesn't make sense to do that when you've only got 1 or 2 hectares, or even sometimes 10 hectares in a farm site. So it may be a case of looking to log in summer when you can drive highway trucks over grass paddocks, or using forwarders. Certainly, like minimising like any infrastructure if you can, because that's generally can be using revenue from the trees to provide something that the farm doesn't really need. There's been quite a debate over time about the economics of growing trees on farms, and the biggest issue for everyone, of course, is that you get an annual cash flow out of your farming, hopefully, if things are going well, but there's quite a wait if you're going to plant a woodlot. Key things that I've always found is that if you just get on and plant a block, then and get on with the rest of your life, then it's amazing how quickly that time disappears, and you don't end up waiting, and so suddenly it's the trees are there ready to harvest. We've been harvesting woodlots for people around this area lately, and it's quite amazing how large some of the returns are. You don't need that large a block to build up quite a large cash box sitting there. We've been looking at net returns over the last 2 to 3 years of sort of between $10,000 and $40,000 a hectare, and where a farmer might have a 2 hectare woodlot that's reasonably well maintained and straightforward, I mean, they might end up with a cheque for $60,000. There's a wealth of information that can be gained by being involved with farm forestry. In fact, one of the biggest problems with going to farm forestry field days is that if there's 10 people there, you'll get 11 different opinions on how to do it. But it certainly gives you plenty of opportunity to sift through that, and there are generally some people there that are more than keen to help you get on with the job. Intangible benefits, I guess, from the planting on this farm is that it creates a lovely place to be and to work. There's a huge debate about choice of species, and there's no simple answer. If your primary goal is to have relatively low risk and relatively high returns, then you need to look at radiata on most sites. So long as, and the good thing about radiata is it will grow well on a wide range of sites. There are some cases when radiata is not suited and other species are better, and the classic is what we see on this property here with poplar for tunnel gully erosion. It's an absolute perfect species choice. It thrives on that moisture, and their roots block up the tunnel gullying and do a very good job. I've been privileged to be able to enjoy using timber that's been grown on this farm. When Mum and Dad first bought this farm in the early 60s, they planted a little block of radiata, and when Nikki and I first leased the farm, we built a house, and my brother Tony milled that radiata on his portable sawmill, and we built the house with it. And we've lived in that house for 26 or 27 years. Just recently we logged a little block that we had planted, and we actually milled it ourselves and then used it to build a boat shed, and so it's quite a satisfying and privileged thing to be able to plant trees and tend them and then log them and mill them and build with them. And so it does make a lie of anyone that says that it's pointless them growing trees because it takes too long for them to ever grow and they'll never be around to use them. So we're like I say, on some sites on this farm we're well into second rotation. One of the real advantages of trees on farm for me is that it allows you to carry on farming some of these sites. This is one of the last sheep and cattle properties in this area that isn't totally planted in plantation and radiata. I hazard that by us actually planting the areas that we did in radiata has allowed us to carry on farming this area. And as the fortunes of farming and forestry change, that gives you the opportunity to take advantage of that. So at the moment, agriculture is having a good run, and so people are actually quite happy to have this in pasture and to be able to graze it. But all the properties behind us, which are now in plantation forestry, that option is not open to them. It's so for me, being able to have a mixture of trees and grazing on the same property gives us that flexibility and choice, and allows us to be able to keep on doing that.